Good evening, everyone. I'm Ankit, and you're watching the Daily News Simplified. And today is 22nd of August of the year 2024. Now, in today's DNS, we'll be covering six important articles, which you can see here on the slide. And these articles have been picked from the Hindu, the Indian Express, and the Business Line newspaper. Now, if you like this video, you know what to do. Click on the like button and also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more and more current affairs content. Now, in India's e-commerce business, we have seen in recent times the competition has been increasing. And in this regard, today's article is highlighting the fact that the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, he has highlighted that e-commerce entities, they are engaged in an activity called as predatory pricing. Now, the sector that is e-commerce in recent times have become more important because people like you and I, we have been frequently ordering from these websites and platforms. Now, the particular sector demonstrates the effects of liberalization on economy and how the developments across the world has trickled down to Indian economy as well. Hence, this particular topic is important from GS Paper 3 syllabus. Also, questions related to investment in various sectors are important from mains exam perspective, which you can see from this PYQ of the year 2014, which asks the effect of FDI on defense sector. So you can understand a similar question can appear on e-commerce sector as well. So in this regard, let us understand in detail what is e-commerce sector, what are the policies of the government in this regard, and how other sector is facing challenges in its current regard. Now, e-commerce is any transaction such as transaction over goods and services which occurs over the internet. Now, India has primarily two models of e-commerce. First is called the marketplace model, where the e-commerce entities they act as a marketplace which facilitates interaction with the traders who sell their goods and services to consumers like you and I. And in this regard, the e-commerce entity they play a passive role. That is, they facilitate the transaction over goods and services. On the contrary, there's another model called as inventory model, where the e-commerce entities themselves they act as a seller and they sell goods and services directly to consumers like you and I. And the examples for marketplace they include sites such as Amazon as well as Flipkart. On the other hand, quick commerce and quick delivery services such as Blinkit, Zepto, and Big Basket, they are examples of inventory based e-commerce websites because these entities they have their own stocks of FMCG products. Understood. Now there are varying regulations in these two sectors which we'll look in this particular slide on. Now, why is the business in general moving towards e-commerce? So, in this regard, let us understand what advantages does e-commerce has over the traditional retail sector. First of all, you can understand that setting up an e-commerce business, it involves lower setting up cost. Because, for example, if you're setting up a brick to mortar physical shop, you'll be required to purchase or rent the shop as well. In addition to setting up the warehouse where you will source your raw materials from. So all of these in you can say in traditional brick and mortar uh, shops, it involves higher cost as against just setting up of a website cost in e-commerce sector. So establishing an e-commerce business, it requires lower setting up of cost. Further, it is also easier to market your goods as far as e-commerce is concerned because you can advertise over different online platforms, which reduces your uh, advertising cost, and it also enables you to get a broader set of customers because customers they are not physically restricted in accessing your shops. Rather they can just log in into their internet and use your website to purchase goods and services. Additionally, for consumers it provides increased access to multiple marketplace that you're not just relegated to one website, and you can always shop anything from another websites as well. So all of these are advantages that are there with e-commerce sector, both for businesses who set up e-commerce websites and also for traders who sell their goods and services on the marketplace of these e-commerce websites. Further, for consumers as well, it provides wider access and wider choices, which means reduced cost and improved competition as far as consumers are concerned. So, in this regard, let us understand what are the regulations and policies of the government are in regards to e-commerce sector. Now, knowing the potential of e-commerce sector, government has brought forward a liberal FDI policy, which means government allows 100% of FDI for marketplaces, and it prohibits investment in inventory-based e-commerce models. So you can understand, by promoting 100% FDI, government is looking to increase investment in the marketplace model of e-commerce. Further, government has also established what is known as open network of digital commerce. Now, this open network, it promotes establishing of an open network for all aspects of e-commerce, be it exchange of goods and services. Further, this ONDC, it also provides consumers and sellers the opportunity to use any compatible app of their choice to carry out transactions in e-commerce websites. Hence, you can say it increases the choices for both sellers and consumers to access best deals on any e-commerce website. Further, government is increasingly procuring its goods and services through e-commerce as well. That is through government e-marketplace, abbreviated as a GEM portal. Also, the government in agricultural sector is linking various agriculture mandis through enam portal, which increases the avenues for both sellers of agricultural produce and consumers to get goods and services from pan India basis. Also, to protect consumers from various risks associated with e-commerce, government brought forward Consumer Protection E-commerce Rule of the year 2020. And under this rule, the government, it prohibited e-commerce entities from indulging in unfair trade practices, which we'll look into in the later part of today's video. So, in this regard, has government regulation and policies made or done away with all the challenges in the sector? The answer to this question is obviously not, because there are still certain challenges which exist with e-commerce in India. And the first is the indulgence of anti competitive practices by the e commerce entities in India. Because as you can see from this news clipping, also, the Minister for Commerce and Industry has highlighted that Amazon, which is an e marketplace, it is indulged in anti competitive practices such as predatory pricing. Now, these anti competitive practices, they not just involve predatory pricing, but also examples of self preferencing and exclusive deal that e-commerce entities sell with uh, get into with various sellers. Now let us explain, or let me explain this predatory pricing with the help of an example. For example, on an e-commerce website, there are two players who sell bags. And suppose the manufacturing cost of that bag is rupees 1000. And in this regard, player A, he or she will be selling that bag for rupees 1100, which includes rupees 100 profit. And for example, another player, which is B, which is a big player, you can understand he or she can sell this bag for even a lower cost. For example, say 900 rupees, and she takes rupees 1100 loss on this particular transaction. Now, suppose what if the player B has bigger pockets? So you can realize the player B can outbid player A until and unless the player A gets out of market. And after there's only one player which is selling the book bag, then that player B can increase the prices of bag to say rupees 1200, which is way beyond the market price. Now, this practices, that is selling of a good and services at a loss, is called that predatory pricing, because this practice is aimed to drive out the competition from the market. So this is what you can call is an anti-competitive practices which are indulged currently by big commerce players. Also, there are examples of self-preferencing. For example, whenever you are shopping for an item on Amazon, first and second search result will almost invariably it will reflect Amazon basic products. And also, if you are to pay for that product, you will be exclusively required to pay using Amazon Pay, which is a proprietary payment service of Amazon, and you'll not be asked to pay through Paytm or PhonePe, which are its competitors. So these examples of self-preferencing also inhibit competition in the market. Further, you can understand these e-commerce websites, they get into exclusive deal by manufacturers such as mobile phones, which also intend to restrict the competition in the market. Now let us look at the second challenge, which is known as infrastructural bottlenecks. Now you can understand delivery of products through e-commerce requires a large network of warehouses, transport equipment, and also last mile delivery services. So you can understand delivery of goods and services in say a metro city is quite easier as against delivery of goods and services in a remote location in Uttarakhand. Because if I order any good and services in Delhi, I'll be delivered that service in a day or two, as against 7 to 10 days time it takes delivery in Uttarakhand. So this is an example of how infrastructural bottlenecks not just increases the cost of delivery, but it also increases the time taken for delivery of goods and services. Another challenge is the existence of regulatory uncertainty in countries' e-commerce sector. Because first of all, I've highlighted that government it promotes FDI and just marketplace model of e-commerce as against prohibiting FDI in the inventory sector. Now, this prohibition of FDI in inventory sector it impacts the ability of foreign players to invest in e-commerce and also scale up their businesses, ultimately impacting innovation and competition in the sector. Further, government is looking to impose data protection norms on this website, which you can understand will also increase the cost of doing business for these websites. So this is what regulatory uncertainty can increase the cost of doing business and also inhibit in foreign investment in certain sections. Further, we have witnessed reduced consumer trust and bad experiences of consumers as far as e-commerce transactions is concerned, because increasingly on social media we are witnessing that when a customer has ordered mobile phone, he or she may have obtained a brick or even a dishwash bar as against the mobile phone, and all of this highlights the examples of reduced consumer trust and bad experiences, which goes against the very sector and its economics of scale. Further, we have witnessed cultural and behavioral barriers in Indian population, which prohibits them from indulging in e-commerce transactions. For example, even today, people from smaller towns they feel more comfortable in going to a local kirana shop for purchasing of groceries as against purchasing groceries over an online medium. And same goes with purchase of say clothes and shoes because people find it more convenient in shopping in offline. And because of this fact, even the penetration in retail market of e-commerce is just 8%, which means total retail transactions in the country, only 8% is done over the e-commerce website. So you can understand the potential of e-commerce is quite high. However, due to cultural and behavioral barriers, the penetration of e-commerce even today is somewhat less. So, in this regard, let us understand what are the way forward in order to reduce the challenges associated with e-commerce sector in India. And the first is the need to bring a national e-commerce policy. And in this regard, there has been demands from various sections to impose what is known as ex ante framework. Now, whenever the regulator will have powers under the ex ante framework, it will enable the sectoral regulator to give instructions to the companies even before the anti-competitive practices has taken place. Hence, proactive measures can be taken by the regulator under national e-commerce policy if it were to have ex ante framework. Further, there's a enhanced role for the government in this sector because government can increasingly provide support to the players in the sector by providing them with necessary infrastructure such as logistics park, as well as multimodal transportation sector, which will reduce the both cost and time taken for transportation of goods and services. And also, government can provide robust data protection framework to provide transfer of sensitive data outside the country. Additionally, government can also play a key role in ensuring level playing field between both offline and online retailers by uh, giving them both tax and incentives in this regard. Further, there is also a need to have a balanced regulation of the sector so as to promote, first of all, self regulation by companies, because companies can themselves determine what kind of contracts or what kind of discounts they'll offer. And also, they can have their own mechanisms for conflict resolution between them. Additionally, the Competition Commission of India can look into any anti-competitive practices on a case-by-case basis. Hence, it will all look to reduce the overall regulatory cholesterol of the sector. Further, there's also a need to have a mechanism of onboarding micro, small, and medium enterprises over these marketplaces, because these marketplaces, they should take initiatives which will not just impart digital skills but also marketing skills to these small enterprises, and it will also enhance their avenues to gain more and more customers through the access of marketplaces. So this was all for today's discussion on the first topic, that was e-commerce in India severe weakness because of the increased exports of the pharmaceutical products. Understood. Now this subset of the topic, it is important from GS paper 3 perspective because the syllabus highlights changes in industrial policy and its effect on industrial growth. Now, India has witnessed increased changes in its industrial policy to promote domestic manufacturing in various sectors. And because of this very fact, the manufacturing of, say, the pharmaceutical products has increased in recent times. Further, also, there are several questions in this regard. For example, this 2013 PYQ on the impact of liberalization on companies owned by Indian people. So you can understand the various changes in its industrial policy and increased manufacturing services. They are also important from means perspective. So in this regard, we'll discuss India's pharmaceutical sector today because it is an important sector as far as Indian manufacturing is concerned. Now, India's pharmaceutical sector, this sector consists of more than 10,500 companies. And because of increased manufacturing practices, we have seen increase in India's drug exports, and this has increased by more than two times in the past decade, that is a period of 10 years. Now, India has become third largest producer of drugs by volume. And in the last financial year, that is 2022 and 23, India exported goods for more than, drug formulations for more than 25 billion US dollars. So you can understand the very large size of India's pharmaceutical sector. Coming to vaccines, India is the world's largest supplier of vaccines, accounting for about 65% of total vaccine demand. And this sector played a key role in fulfilling both domestic and international demand for vaccines such as that of COVID-19 vaccine. So, in this regard, let us understand what are the factors that are driving growth of the India's pharmaceutical industry. And the first is the India's intellectual property rights regime and the innovation framework of the pharmaceutical sector. Now, in this regard, India's product patent regime, you can say, is very relaxed and liberal. And because of this relaxed product product regime, it has enabled Indian companies to register themselves for what is known as compulsory licensing policy. And under this compulsory licensing policy, Indian drug manufacturers can even manufacture the generic versions of patented drugs. Further, due to increased research and development opportunities, the Indian pharmaceutical sector has been enabled to indulge in drug discovery, researches in biosimilars, and also prohibiting and promoting bacterial culture, which is very essential for manufacturing and development of vaccines. Also, government has taken a key role in enhancing the economic factors in this regard. As I've already highlighted, the compulsory licensing regime has promoted the production of generic drugs, which are low cost versions of patented drugs. And this has increased the access of medicines to most population in the India. Further, India also witnesses low production cost because of low cost of its labor. And this has promoted the export of drugs to other countries as well. Further, India is also witnessing an abundant talent pool because India witnesses high demand of, say, talent who are talented in, say, biotechnology fields or even in fields such as pharmaceutical development. And this professional, they play a key role in development of the pharmaceutical industry in general. Further, India is also a booming domestic market. Not just India's population is high, but also India is witnessing increased demand of medical tourism because people from neighboring countries they are coming to India for their treatment. Hence, because of these economic factors, India has witnessed a key growth of its pharmaceutical industry. Now, also there are important developments as far as infrastructure development is concerned. Because first of all, government has taken a key interest in establishing special economic zones, pharmaceutical hubs, and drug manufacturing clusters, such as that in southern states of Tamil Nadu, Goa, as well as in northern states of, say, Himachal Pradesh, as well as Uttarakhand. And because of this ready-made infrastructure which is provided to the companies, India's pharmaceutical industry has developed in these particular states. Also, you can say development of pharmaceutical industry in southern state will also cater to more and more export demand as it is easier to export pharmaceutical products from nearby markets. Further, government is also extending active support in by providing incentives and subsidies, for example, to less developed states such as Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. And this support by the government has enabled establishment of pharmaceutical industry in these hitherto unexplored regions. For example, district of Solan in Himachal Pradesh, as well as district of Haridwar, they have emerged as key manufacturing hubs in the northern part of the country. Further, government is undertaking key area of interest as far as establishing regulatory compliance with that of other markets as well. And in this regard, Central Drug Regulating Authority, that is CDSCO, is taking a key role in harmonizing regulations in India's manufacturing sector, as well as regulation in key export markets such as that of US as well as UK. And this enabling of regulatory compliance has enabled India to manufacture drugs and export to these high paying Western markets such as United States and United Kingdom. Further, Indian companies is increasingly involved in global collaboration between Indian companies and Western companies, which has enabled technology transfer and exchange of knowledge between these two countries. And this was witnessed actively in the manufacturing of vaccines for COVID-19 pandemic, where AstraZeneca vaccine, which was developed in UK, was licensed to the Indian company that was Serum Institute to produce its licensed version that was known as Covishield. So you can understand all these factors in total, they act as a driving growth factor for the pharmaceutical industry in India. And in this regard, let us understand what are the government measures that have been extended to support pharmaceutical industry in general. First is the active regulatory framework, which is heralded by a Drug Cosmetic Act of the year 1940. As this act, it regulates import, manufacturing, and distribution of pharmaceutical products in India, as well as the Central Drug Regulator, which is Central Drug Regulatory Organization, abbreviated as CDSCO. Now, now this organization it approves new drug formulations, their clinical trials, which helps in. Sorry for the delay again. I'm really irritated, but please bear with me for today's discussion. Yeah, as I was saying, the government has formulated a regulator which regulates, establishes regulatory compliance and harmonizes regulation with that of other countries. For example, there's this US regulator called US FDA. And when both of the regulations of India and US are similar, then it will enable Indian companies to manufacture and export their drugs to US markets. So this is what a harmonized regulatory framework does and promotes the growth of Indian pharmaceutical industry. Further, government is also looking to promote research and innovation in the sector, which was done through what was known as Pharma Vision of the year 2020. Now, under this vision, this particular uh, vision, it promotes drug discovery and has enabled India to become an innovation powerhouse. Also, government is looking to actively promote quality standards and compliance monitoring, such as establishing good manufacturing processes and good laboratory processes. Now, all these good manufacturing and good laboratory process, they are intended to enhance the export potential of India's drug formulations and whatever is being manufactured in India. Because as you can understand, better manufacturing processes will mean that drugs are of higher quality, and hence you can export these drugs to Western markets, which are more developed markets. Also, to promote affordability, government is also undertaking price regulation of key drugs. For example, there's this National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, which publishes a list called National List for Essential Medicines. Now, whatever medicines are mentioned in this particular list, the prices of these drugs are under the regulation of the government. Hence, any manufacturing company cannot increase the prices of the drugs which are mentioned in NLEM by an exorbitant value. Further, government also undertakes distribution of affordable and generic medicines through Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhiya Pariyojana through the National Jan Aushadhiya Kendras. Further, government is also looking to promote industries and their development under what is called production linked incentive scheme for key starting materials as well as active pharmaceutical ingredients which are key raw materials as far as manufacturing of drugs are concerned. Also, government has liberalized its foreign direct investment policy by enabling 100% FDI under automatic rule for greenfield investment, as well as 74% FDI for brownfield investment. So these liberal FDI policies are also intended to increase investment in pharmaceutical sector and also establish manufacturing setups for foreign companies. Understood. Now, let us understand what are the challenges that are faced by the pharmaceutical industry in recent times. And the first is the challenge related to ensuring quality and safety of its pharmaceutical products. And in recently, must have heard that in Gambia, the cough syrups which are manufactured in India, they were found to be contaminated with a chemical called ethylene glycol, and this contamination, it resulted into death of people who consumed the adulterated uh, what you can call a cough syrup. So because of qualities related to safety and quality, it has not just brought bad name to India's pharmaceutical industry, but it also jeopardized our export to important export markets as well. The second challenge is the need or the property that India has is a liberal or relaxed intellectual property regime. Because although the regime is relaxed and liberal, it it enables increased production of generic goods. But also, this factor also discourages innovation and investment by other companies who think that it will not be adequately protected by India's intellectual property regime. So this reduced innovation has also resulted into reduced investment in the particular sector. Also, the third challenge is related to dependence on imports for key raw materials such as active pharmaceutical ingredients. Now, for 70% of total demand for active pharmaceutical ingredients in the country, it is filled or fulfilled by just one country, that is China. So you can understand, on one hand, India is involved in a conflict with China, and on the other hand, India is dependent for key raw materials as far as China is concerned, which jeopardizes India's geopolitical and economic security. Further, government has also brought forward what is known as an unstable pricing policy, because first of all, it regulates prices of key drugs and formulations through national list of essential medicines. However, this regulation and uncertainty also reduces the incentives for companies to establish their manufacturing setups in India because of uh, low profits potential. Also, India has witnessed somewhat inadequate levels of storage infrastructure in the country, which has enabled or which has prohibited India to become a global vaccine powerhouse. And this we witnessed even during the COVID-19 pandemic, because during this pandemic, India faced large scale challenges in distribution of vaccines in, say, semi urban as well as rural areas in the country. Also, we can see that medical companies, in connivance with the healthcare professionals, they are indulged in unethical practices such as overuse and overprescriptions of antibiotics. And this overuse and overprescription has resulted into what is known as increased antimicrobial resistance in Indian population. So these were the challenges that are faced by pharmaceutical industry in India. And in this regard, let us consider what should be the suggestive way forward in order to make India's pharmaceutical industry more and more developed. And the first in this regard is the need to have an active quality control and transparency regime. Because of this lax quality control and transparency, we have witnessed that India's pharmaceutical industry has gotten a bad name. And in this regard, there is an active need to increase monitoring by the state regulatory authorities of the major manufacturing units. And because of increased monitoring, we can ensure that the quality control levels are adequate in India's pharmaceutical sector. Further, India's pharmaceutical industry, they should be looking to make the technologies more and more advanced, such as utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning in their manufacturing processes, which will not just ensure increased quality, but it will also reduce the time taken for manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. Further, computer simulations can also be used at drug discovery and drug testing stages, which will reduce the dependence on animal testing. Further, government should also look to undertake infrastructure development in the country by promoting improved supply chain, and also infrastructure development for establishing of raw material industries such as that of API industries. Further, use of technology can also be utilized to develop track and trace mechanism to track the flow of genuine medicines, which will also reduce the incentives for companies to market fake medicines in general. Further, promoting research and innovation, especially in areas such as rare diseases, in development of biosimilars as well as stem cell research, will also develop the technological levels of India's pharmaceutical industry. Further, by establishing a ethical policy framework, will reduce the malpractices by reducing the malpractices of the companies involved, and will also promote a good name for India's pharmaceutical industry in general. So this was all for today's discussion in the mains related section, and with this we move to next set of articles. Now, the next set of article, the first article, as you can see, appeared in the Hindu newspaper, and this article highlights that vote has been put to make Ukraine a member of the International Criminal Court. Now, important multilateral bodies and agencies, they are important from GS paper to perspective, because as you can see, the syllabus itself highlights important international institutions, agencies and their structure and mandate, and also important multilateral bodies have been asked in prelims before. So this topic becomes important from prelims perspective. So in this regard, let us understand what is this International Criminal Court. Now, it is the only permanent court in the world which has the authority to prosecute individuals for serious international crimes such as that of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, as well as conduct of aggression. Now, this authority or body is headquartered in Hague, which is located in the country of Netherlands, and it was established in the year 2002 under the Rome Statute. Further, as you can understand, this is a separate body from the International Court of Justice, as the International Court of Justice settle disputes between member states. While on the other hand, International Criminal Court, it prosecutes individuals for international crimes. Now, the members of this International Criminal Court, it includes 124 member countries, and the notable non-members, it includes countries such as India, China, Israel, Russia, as well as the United States. Now, this body has four principal organs, the most important of which is the Judicial Division, which consists of 19 judges who serve on a non-year tenure, which is non-renewable in nature. Further, this organ also consists Office of Prosecutor, which is responsible for investigation and prosecution of criminals, and also this organ consists of a registry. Further, the jurisdiction of this body, it can be triggered either by a member state party or by United Nations Security Council or even by the International Communal Criminal Court's prosecutor itself. Now, what are the conditions for exercising jurisdiction of this body? There are three conditions. First is that the crime should have been committed on or after the date when the Rome Statute came into place. That was 1st July of the year 2022. Sorry, 2002. As well as it has the crime should have been committed by a member of Nash or a national of a state party or on the territory of a state party. Further, the crime could also have been committed in a state that has accepted the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court. Now, the third condition in which there is a condition for exercising jurisdiction is when the United Nations Security Council refers the matter to the International Criminal Court. And by this factor, the United Nations Security Council can also extend the jurisdiction of ICC even to non state parties, and this is an important provision. Now, further, this body ensures what is known as a complementarity principle, which means that this body it intervenes only in the case when national courts are unwilling, unable to prosecute serious international crimes. So, in this regard, let us now solve the practice question that we have formulated. Consider the following statements with reference to International Criminal Court. Under Rome Statute, the court can investigate crimes only within its member states' territories, which you can understand is an incorrect statement because it can even investigate cases outside the territory when requested so by the United Nations Security Council. Moving on to the second statement, the International Criminal Court intervenes only when the national courts are unable to prosecute serious international crimes. Now, this is a correct statement. As I've highlighted here, it is a complementarity principle, and this court intervenes only when national courts are unable or unwilling to prosecute serious international crimes. Moving on to the third statement, the ICC, it investigates crimes only when referred to by the state party, which again is incorrect because the crimes can also be referred to by the United Nations Security Council or by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. So, which of the statements given above is or are correct? As only statement 2 is correct, hence option C is the right answer. Moving to the next article, which you can see appeared in the explained section of the Indian Express newspaper, and this article highlights the recent event when the governor of the state of Karnataka uh, gave his assent to enable prosecution of the or investigation against the CM of Karnataka. Now, the various parties have alleged whether is government bound by the aid and advice of Council of Ministers in this regard, or whether the government can act on his or her own discretion. Now, this article deals with Article 163, subsection A of the Indian Constitution, which means it is important from GS paper to syllabus, as the syllabus highlights Indian Constitution and its significant provisions. Further, questions on important articles of the Indian Constitution have been occurring in prelims examination from time to time. That's why this topic is important from prelims perspective. So, in this regard, let us understand what is this Article 163 all about. Now, this Article 163 deals with the powers of governor in discharging his or her day-to-day duties. Now, in this regard, Article 163, as you can see from this snapshot of the Constitution, highlights that there shall be a Council of Ministers with Chief Minister as its head, which is required to aid and advise the governor in exercise of its function. However, it is also important to note that in some cases, the government is required by the Constitution to act, the governor can act on his or her own discretion. And the any question it arises that whether the government can act on his or her discretion, the decision in this regard rests with the governor himself. And hence, this cannot be questioned in any court of law whether the governor should have or not have acted on his or her own discretion. Now, the question on whether the advice tendered by the minister to the governor shall not be inquired into the court, because this highlights the provision of separation of power between judiciary as well as that of executive. Now, as I've already highlighted, this case highlights that the governor of the state of Karnataka has given his sanction for conduct of investigation against the Karnataka CM on allegation of corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act. And in this regard, the CM of Karnataka has argued that the governor rather should not act on his or her discretion and rather should follow the aid and advice of Council of Ministers in this regard, which the Council of Ministers had highlighted that the governor should withdraw the show cause notice. So let us understand what is the question of law. That is governor really bound by the aid and advice of Council of Ministers in such cases, or the governor should act on his or her own discretion. Now, in this regard, the Supreme Court of India, under its various judgments, has highlighted that governor is bound by aid and advice of Council of Ministers, be it Samsher Singh versus Union of India case or State of Rajasthan versus Union of India case, where the Supreme Court highlighted that the governor, although has some discretion, but it is limited to the specific situation which is provided by the Constitution of India. However, in the MP Special Police Establishment versus State of Madhya Pradesh case, the judgment of which was given in 2004, the Supreme Court it highlighted that the governor discretion in cases of granting sanction for prosecution, that the governor has the discretion because the governor can act independently in the regard where the ministers themselves are under the investigation. So, in the current case, the High Court of Karnataka is determining whether the circumstances of this judgment is applicable to the current case or not. So, in this regard, let us solve the practice question. Which of the following statements currently describes the powers and functions of Council of Ministers under the Article 163 of the Indian Constitution? Now, this is a straightforward question, and I'll request each and every one of you to answer the correct answer in the comment section down below. Moving on to the next article, which again appeared in the explained section of the Indian Express newspaper. And this news article highlights that Malaysia, it has changed its stance on conduction of orangutan diplomacy. Because earlier, Malaysia decided to send orangutans to countries which are key importers of its palm oil. However, mm, when it met with several critics and uh, opposition, then the Malaysian government changed its own stances. And this news article describes a vulnerable species that is orangutan. Hence, it is important from GS Paper 3 perspective. Further, the questions related to orangutan themselves have appeared in the prelims of the year 2023. So again, this article becomes important from prelims perspective. Now, the orangutans are a very intelligent species because of their key behavioral traits. Now, the orangutans, they primarily diet on fruits, hence they are determined or called as primarily frugivorous animals who occasionally, only occasionally consume insects and small vertebrates. Further, their activities include that they are predominantly arboreal, which means they are tree dwelling in nature, and they are mainly solitary animals that they prefer to live individually rather than in herds. Further, the most important behavioral trait of orangutans is that they know how to use tools such as that of sticks to extract insects or gauge depth of water before crossing that water body. Further, these orangutans they are primarily found in rainforests such as tropical rainforests which have dense vegetation and high canopy structure. Because these high canopies they enable first of all availability of fruit trees, and also overlapping canopies enable them to stay over the ground and protected. Further, these orangutans they exhibit various behavioral traits such as they communicate using facial expression and sounds, and also they exhibit cultural behavior such as they learn by interaction with other individuals as well. Now, what is the conservation status of orangutans? Now, all three orangutan species, that is Bornean, Sumatran, and Papanawali, they are critically endangered due to increased human activities and poaching activities. So, based on this information, let us now solve the practice question with reference to orangutan. Consider the following statements. First statement is that they are carnivorous only species of apes, which is again incorrect because they are primarily fruit consuming animals and they only occasionally consume insects and small vertebrates and they do not consume any meat. Hence, they are not carnivorous. The second statement is they are renowned for their intelligence and the use of sticks to gauge depth of water before crossing. It is correct. And the third statement that all three species of orangutan are again critically endangered in IUCN Red List. Again, a correct statement as I have highlighted here. So the how many of the above statements are correct? Correct option is answer B because two statements are correct. Moving on to the last article of the day, which appeared, you can see in the Business Line newspaper, and it deals with a statutory body called Competition Commission of India. And you can see there are three articles in the newspaper regarding this very body. Now, this news article becomes important from GS paper to perspective because the syllabus highlights statutory, regulatory, and various quasi-judicial bodies. And also, questions related to constitutional bodies have been appearing in prelims from the time to time. Now, the Competition Commission of India Act or Competition Commission of India, it was established in the year 2002 and after the Competition Law of the year Competition Act was passed. Further, this act it replaced the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which was enacted in the year 1969. And the primary objective of establishing this very body is to promote competition in the Indian market and to prevent companies from indulging in anti-competitive practices such as cartelization, abuse of their dominance, and indulging into anti-competitive mergers and acquisition. Now, this body consists of seven members, that is a chairperson and six members, all of whom are appointed by the central government. And is there any qualification? The answer is yes. That the individual who are appointed as chairs and members of the CCI, they should be of individual who have special knowledge in uh, trade related and competition sectors and also the professional experience of not less than 15 years. Further, the functions of this body it includes conduction of investigation and adjudicating. This includes imposing penalties on entities who are found guilty of violating the act and also approval of mergers and acquisition. For example, approval of merger between Air India and Air Vistara was approved by this very body. Further, this body also promotes competition by conducting studies and raising awareness. And also, it provides remedies to parties who are affected by anti competitive practices. So, in this regard, let us solve the practice question now. With reference to Competition Commission of India, consider the following statements. First, it is a statutory body under the Monopolies Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which is incorrect because although it is a statutory body, however, it is a statutory body under Competition Act of the year 2002 and not MRTP Act. The second statement is that the Union Minister of Corporate Affairs serve as an ex officio chairman, again incorrect, because the chairperson is appointed by the central government and he or she shall have the at least 15 years of professional experience in the corresponding field. Further, the third statement, the CCI has the power to impose penalties on entities which are found guilty of violating the Competition Act. Because recently CCI imposed penalty on companies such as Google, hence third statement is correct, and also because I have highlighted here, hence the correct answer to this practice question is option A, as only third statement was correct. So with this, we conclude our today's session of Daily News Simplified, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m. So until then, I bid you a very good night.